Who's Pulling Your Strings? From the CCRU Writings. The following transcript was first brought to our attention in early December 2002 by a bemused colleague who came across it while trawling through the web for conspiracy-related material. The site later disappeared without a trace, despite our persistent attempts to relocate it. No doubt Miss Morrison will attribute this to the CCRU takeover of cyberspace. The Morrison's allegations is clearly preposterous, and the bulk of the content mystifies us entirely. It indicates some limited, albeit highly confused, knowledge of recent CCRU cultural production. No member of the CCRU has any recall whatsoever of encountering Miss Justine Morrison at any time. We are not convinced that she even exists. Our perplexity has provoked us to respond. We must emphasize, however, that we do not acknowledge any responsibility to address her bizarre accusations. Morrison's web text, "I was a CCRU meat puppet," was purportedly transcribed faithfully from a live address given to the South London Monarch Victim Support Group, November 3, 2002. We have reproduced it here without abridgment or alteration, with CCRU's own comments at the end. "I was a CCRU meat puppet" by Justine Morrison. This testament is intended as a warning. It is addressed to those whose eyes and ears and minds can be opened. Hope lies with those people, those brave souls who dare to look. And if my experiences have taught me anything, it is that there is always hope, no matter how dark and desperate things may seem. Many, many people around the world are learning to open their eyes. I know that some of you will open your eyes this evening. Don't underestimate your power and importance. With each new pair of eyes that can see, we grow stronger, and the evil retreats. It depends on not being looked at, on not being seen for what it is. You wouldn't be here unless you had already questioned the lie. So the fact that you're here at all is a cause for hope. Many of the things I will tell you will seem unbelievable at first. Many of you will think that the events I will describe could not possibly have happened. Some of you will think that I am crazy. You know what? That is exactly what I would have thought a few years ago. Yes, that's exactly what I would have thought, even though many of those atrocious, unbelievable things had already happened to me personally. You see, when something very atrocious happens to you, you can't remember it. You screen it out in order to survive. That's what they count on. They feed on your disbelief. They want to make it impossible for you to believe that they exist at all. That's how they operate. This is a critical time in our struggle. Things are dark and desperate now. Believe me, things are more dark and desperate than you could ever imagine. They are playing out on the biggest possible stage. The biggest possible. The whole human race is at risk. I wish I was exaggerating. You know, they are getting more and more sure of themselves. They are passing messages on the grandest possible scale, and they do not even feel the need to encrypt them very much. It's better with the butterfly. Can you imagine how I felt when I saw that slogan for the first time? The biggest software company in the world announces the upgrading of its online network with a strapline that was specifically addressed to me, whom they call Assassinate. When I saw those words, I just froze. Thankfully, I have come so far in my recovery now that I did not succumb to panic. I realized this sign was as much a cause for hope as a reason to fear. They had gained a new confidence in showing themselves. The war was entering another phase. So be it. It's better with a butterfly. Don't believe it for a second. It will be worse. Far, far worse. The MSN8 campaign is a sign that my former handlers, a group calling itself the CCRU, has taken control of the emerging planet mind. This should make you very scared indeed. My tale is easier to tell because of the brave and honest trailblazing done by Kathy O'Brien. It is Kathy who has done most to expose the monstrous evil of the Monarch program. Every American, in fact, every concerned citizen of the world, needs to read her book, Transformation of America. Presumably, many of you are here today because you have already read it. For the benefit of those who haven't read Kathy's work, I must pause and explain a little about what the Monarch program is. Those who know a little about it will have to excuse the fact that my initial explanation of Monarch will be very short. Some might think it misleadingly short. Perhaps this is so. But to consider Monarch in all its aspects would take much longer than the time I have available today. The Monarch program is a mind control program. It is named after the monarch butterfly because, just as the butterfly changes its form, metamorphosis, So the controllers transform the mind and personality of their subjects. Monarch recruits his victims when they are children, usually with the collusion of their parents. He uses what is known as trauma-based mind control to condition its victims. Very briefly, this involves subjecting the children to stimuli so horrible, so overwhelming that their psyche disintegrates. The children cannot deal with what they have experienced, so their personality breaks down into so-called alters, submerged fragmentary personae that can be called up and trained by the controllers to carry out their evil purposes. Who is behind this program? Well, it is known to have been operating in Nazi Germany during the Third Reich, and later to have been adopted by an offshoot of the CIA called MK Ultra. But these agencies are only masks for the forces, the satanic forces, that are really in control. The question for which the whole world should demand an answer is this: why does CCRU refuse to acknowledge its history of Monarch program involvement, even today? No doubt many of you will be asking, what is CCRU? Even those of you who already know about Monarch might not yet know about CCRU and its role within the program. I knew nothing of CCRU until I came across a name in publicity material for their Syzygy, or Occult Twins, festival in London. The name CCRU was strangely familiar to me, and I had no idea why. It was not merely familiar, it was powerfully and unpleasantly evocative. The moment I saw the posters and leaflets, I felt disoriented and threatened by an upwelling panic I couldn't explain. That night I was tormented by senseless, terrifyingly vivid dreams. Each of these dreams took place in an immense, desolate cavern. I felt that I was drugged, or restrained, or both. Either way, I could not move. The cavern was very dark, lit only by candles, and I could see almost nothing apart from row after row of symbols chalked onto the walls. This was unnerving enough, but what still terrorized me when I woke from the dreams were the horrible sounds that resonated in the cavern. There was a disconcerting, continuous chanting, but worse than that, a deep moaning that seemed to issue from the throat of a vast, unearthly creature. These dreams were so vivid that they did not seem like dreams at all. They seemed more like someone else's memories. Although I had every reason to flee this macabre phenomenon, I found that I could not. Instead, I was drawn inwards, as if I had a destined role to play. I had originally planned to remain in London for only a week or so, but now I decided to stay longer, until at least the start of the Syzygy festival. In the end, it turned out that I stayed for the whole thing. CCRU's contributions to Syzygy had taken the form of nightly rituals dedicated to what they openly called demons. Night after night, the theme of twins and twinning reoccurred. At this time, part of me still thought that this was still some kind of art prank, but the nightly rituals and readings were performed with what appeared to be total seriousness. And every day after the official events finished, there were long, involved discussions that lasted deep into the night. None of the CCRU controllers ever seemed to sleep. It was in these discussion sessions that I learned more about the CCRU's belief systems. They claimed to be waging an endless war against the oppressive forces of normal social existence. In general, they seemed wary and paranoid, yet with me they seemed peculiarly trusting and eager to share their esoteric knowledge, as if recognizing a long-lost and sorely missed accomplice. In fact, CCRU seized upon me with an eagerness that should have been distressing, except that my sense of judgment had already decayed too far for that. They claimed that ordinary social reality maintained the power of what they called Atlantean white magic, a kind of elite conspiracy which they said had secretly controlled the planet for millennia. They claimed to traffic with demons who had told them many secrets drawn from a Lemurian tradition of time sorcery that contained within itself everything that was and will be. Lemuria was supposedly an ancient sorceress culture populated with non-human beings. CCRU also said that they had been taught to count by a sea beast called Nomo, which they had first summoned during an elaborate ritual which took place in western Sumatra. It was clear to me from the unspoken undercurrent that human sacrifice had been involved, probably on a massive scale. Their apparent indifference to such suffering fitted in with a general loathing for human existence itself. They celebrated what they saw as the imminent destruction of humanity by the forces of techno-capitalism. Were these just stories, or did they really believe in what they were saying? When I pressed them on this, they never gave me a straight answer. They kept saying that I needed to learn that reality was itself a type of fiction, that both belief and disbelief had to be left behind. I realize now that this was part of a deliberate strategy to mentally destabilize me. At the dead center of the CCRU system was the pandemonium matrix. It is difficult to fully describe what this horrible thing is. It was only later, when I escaped CCRU's influence, that its real nature was made clear to me. What the Matrix amounted to was a list of the demon creatures which Lemurian sorcerers had traded and made pacts with. More than that, the Matrix gave the numerical codes and other protocols that the Lemurians had used to contact these entities. I quickly learned the names and characteristics of many of these beings. I noticed that one seemed to be invoked more frequently than the others. Gatak, a demon associated with terrible destruction and desolation. Night after night, I ingested the CCRU spiritual poison, not realizing, or even really caring, how thoroughly it was insidiously eroding the basic fabric of my being, calling to my own inner demons. I didn't know just how close I was to total destruction, and wouldn't have known were it not for what happened on the last night of Syzygy. This night was devoted to what CCRU called a summoning, but it's clear to me now that it was some form of hideous black mass. After it had been drawn to a close, I had a strong impulse to step outside for some fresh air. Once outside, I was vaguely aware of two trench-coated figures lingering in the darkness. Then things started to happen quickly. Before I had time to react, one of them had grabbed me, covering my mouth. At the same time, the other pulled out a hypodermic syringe from his coat pocket and quickly pushed it into my arm. I realized immediately that they had drugged me. Sedated but still conscious, I was dragged for what seemed like hours to the alleys of Vauxhall. Eventually we arrived at what appeared to be a warehouse of some kind. I remember being taken through a series of security doors, until finally we entered a large basement area. It was here that I was to spend 6 months of shattering revelation. My two rescuers, although it took me several weeks to properly identify them as such, were twin brothers Viktor and Sergei Kowalski, who displayed all the heroism, nobility, and truthfulness of modern knights. They themselves had escaped from a Soviet mind control facility controlled by Russian Satanists. After years of being pursued by agents from the most occult wing of the KGB, the Kowalskis set up the base in London, and there they waged a selfless crusade against the evil satanic mind control. The months I spent with the Kowalskis' deprogramming laboratory, they called it a safe room, were undoubtedly the most illuminating of my life. Their therapeutic regime included hypnosis, drugs, and electrical stimulation. The Kowalskis explained that these techniques were aimed at recovering material buried deep within my mind. They were specially designed to restore the identity of what they described as Monarch slaves, a term that was then completely new to me. The Kowalskis told me that they needed access to the alternate personalities, or alters, who had been with me since childhood. They said that I had been subject to pandemonium programming, a special variant of the Monarch system of personality disintegration, compartmentalization, and indoctrination. The particular numerical combinations of the pandemonium matrix, the Kowalskis told me, had functioned as triggers for my suppressed identity fragments. They warned me that digging down through these deeply compacted layers of trauma would produce inexpressible intensities of anguish. In telling me this, they were not exaggerating in the slightest. Over the following terrible months, I would discover that my memories were lies, that my mind had literally ceased to be my own, and that I had been possessed instead by alien commands and demons. Who had been doing this to me, and why? It was only as my recovery work with the Kowalskis painfully advanced, step by step, that I came to understand the sinister purpose that held me in its claws. The Kowalskis explained that CCRU wasn't an acronym at all, but was actually a version of the ancient West Polynesian word Kru, meaning the devil of apocalypse. Once I understood that they were really Satan worshippers, a lot of other things became much clearer. The supposed Lemurian system was really a name for all the demons of hell. CCRU's role as agents of satanic mind control explained the pedantically detailed theory of trauma that they outlined to me, and also their striking obsession with twins. In the world in which CCRU operated, traumatism was the means, and twins the raw material. It was only by the most heroic and persistent efforts that the Kowalskis had initiated me into this aspect of the phenomenon. In particular, it took months for me to fully accept that what had felt like vivid personal memories were actually telepathic communications from the submerged mental compartments of my missing Monarch twin. The Kowalskis told me that my recent involvement with CCRU, far from being accidental, was the final stage of a long entanglement with them and the forces they represented. Recovered memories from my early childhood show that CCRU had been covertly directing the course of my entire life, education, and process of psychological maturation. I had been chosen from before birth, assigned to them by the ancient breeding masters countless generations before, and had undergone meticulous lifelong training to perform a special mission. I shuddered at the thought of what this mission would involve. The Kowalskis gradually brought me to the terrible realization that my mission had already been accomplished. On the very night of my rescue, they told me that, with my mission complete, I had been scheduled for retirement only hours later. This retirement would involve a long and protracted ceremonial death, to be followed by a ritual devouring by the demon Katak, a physical death, and then a soul death. But what had my mission been? As the therapy progressed, I crossed a new threshold in my recovery and became subject to a new wave of horribly realistic dreams. It was in these dreams that the awful truth about my mission was revealed. They began with a semi-familiar stranger leading me forcefully into the subterranean labyrinth beneath a tropical island. After violating me repeatedly in the butterfly position, he took me down into the Lepidoptera hall. It was long and narrow, walled by shelves and meticulously numbered jars. Each jar contained a butterfly. At first I thought that they were preserved specimens, until I noticed they were moving slightly, opening and closing their wings. "Why don't they die?" I asked. "They can't die while the puppet lives," he replied. It was then that I noticed, shocked, that he was standing behind himself. I heard cryptic numerical chanting in the background. Then the rear figure commanded, "Do it now." The chanting had changed into the incessant words, "Assassinate, assassinate, assassinate, assassinate." I looked down and saw the number 8 was painted onto my chest in blood. Then I saw myself standing over a bloody corpse laid out upon some kind of sacrificial altar. In a moment of sickening revelation, I recognized that the body was that of William Gates III. Of course, my initial response was to deny the possibility that I could be a murderer. Surely this was some sick fantasy. Wasn't Bill Gates manifestly alive and prosperous, even appearing frequently on TV? The Kowalskis were forced to puncture this bubble of comforting illusion. How likely was it that this was actually the true Bill Gates? The Kowalskis taught me that the probability was indeed vanishingly insignificant. Not only did they point out all the subtle distinguishing features so that after comparing video images, I could distinguish between Gates and his double with close to 100% accuracy. They also explained how, for political reasons, Gates' continued existence had become impossible. It was then that I recalled how, every Syzygy night without fail, the same slightly odd-looking middle-aged woman would attend, wearing a shapeless raincoat, an unnatural blonde beehive, dark glasses, and an ornate butterfly tiara. She sat silently, observing the proceedings, her features twisted into a cruel and complacent smile. Recalling this mysterious visitor later, with the help of the Kowalskis, I was able to strip away the disguise and realize who she had been, none other than Microsoft mastermind Bill Gates, or more probably his twin. On other occasions, the Gates entity wore different disguises in order to attend CCRU meetings without attracting attention. Yet he was never without a butterfly jewel of some kind, a tie pin, for instance, or a ring. On one occasion, he appeared masquerading as a Black Snow bluesman, Blind Humpty Johnson. I intuitively felt it had to be him, but I could not see the emblem anywhere. Eventually, I chanced a glimpse into the left lens of his expensive shades and saw, deep in the black mirror, a holographic butterfly fluttering endlessly through the void. It all made a terrible kind of sense, but, understandably, I reacted very badly to the discovery. The Kowalskis told me that this was probably because Gates had been involved with me in earlier episodes of satanic abuse, and that recognizing him had threatened to reactivate unbearable repressed memories. They told me that it would help to acknowledge these previous encounters so that I could begin the process of healing. In any case, there was no longer any doubt about the truth. Gates was dead, and I had murdered him. With Gates' death, Microsoft and CCRU had become one thing. I realized how completely I had misunderstood the situation. CCRU had given every indication of holding Gates in awe, following his instructions without question. Among themselves, they would use many affectionate names for him, such as Dollar Bill, the Gator, and Gates of Pandemonium. He had seemed like a kind of father figure to them. How could the CCRU website have come to generate some of the heaviest traffic on the web, without any advertising or even word-of-mouth popularization, if not for the massive and sustained support offered by Gates and Microsoft. Many web users report that the CCRU site sometimes pops up spontaneously when using certain Microsoft applications. CCRU went to extraordinary lengths to make sure their close links with Gates were never exposed, even going so far as to attack him publicly. Now, of course, I saw that very name, syzygy, had been a cynical declaration of black ritual assassination. One twin would kill another. This was typical of the brazen CCRU style. Years before, CCRU had spoken of the switch. They had also publicly announced that the age of Katak was arriving, when the world would become consumed by blood and fire. The assassination of Gates was supposed to initiate this new era. The Kowalskis explained that Gates was a Romanized version of the Proto-Arabic Katsek, the form of the name of Katak as recorded in the Black Stele in the ruins of Aram. Killing Gates was both a symbolic and a practical act that would enable CCRU to take control of cyberspace and use it for the vast planetary hive mind control system that they are creating. The letters MSN, followed by the butterfly icon, signifies Mission Butterfly, or Monarch program. I never really understood their numbo-jumbo, but they showed me that MSN8 was Kabbalistically equivalent to CCRU. I can't remember how it worked now, but it was very persuasive at the time. After the MSN8 campaign broke, I wrote to CCRU asking them to justify their actions. It was the first time I had attempted to contact them since my healing. They were unable or unwilling to reply. According to the Kowalskis, CCRU were almost certainly Monarch slaves themselves. That was why they could so convincingly feign oblivion about their involvement in the conspiracy, as if they had no knowledge of the way the secret control codes really operated. I said before that these are dark days. Indeed they are. It is impossible to overstate the threat that CCRU and Monarch pose. My purpose here tonight is to draw the world's attention to that, to open your eyes, because to confront the satanic threat, you must accept that it is here. You have to believe the unbelievable. But speaking as a former Monarch slave myself, I would urge caution. To really defeat the Satanists, we must learn everything we can about them. CCRU should be deprogrammed with the same compassionate thoroughness that I was. CCRU commentary. Confronted with the fantastic tales of Project Monarch, even the most tenuous sanity recoils in revulsion from such patent lunacy, while us nevertheless remaining ensnarled in sticky threads of credible evidence extracted from the shadowy basements of state intelligence agencies. Nazi eugenic and mind control experimentation is quite extensively documented. Heinrich Himmler's Lebensborn breeding program, concentration camp research, deliberately induced trauma, and obsession with twins is part of the historical record. It is also relatively uncontestable that, as Project Monarch exposures contend, much of this work was transferred into the hands of American agencies through Project Paperclip. Later CIA mind control experimentation, such as the notorious MK-Ultra program disclosed in documents released by the agency in 1977, exhibits certain continuities with the Nazi research goals. Soviet-based work on mind control, torture, and interrogation techniques substantially mirrors U.S. Cold War activities. Morrison, like O'Brien before her, draws upon random patches of his legacy to weave a Byzantine tale of worldwide conspiracy, in which she herself takes a starring role. Like all conspiracy fictions, hers is spun out of an all-encompassing narrative that cannot possibly be falsified because they want you to believe in their non-existence. To attempt to refute such narratives is to be drawn into a tedious double game. One either has to embrace an arbitrary and outrageous cosmic plot in which everything is being run by the Jews, Masons, Illuminati, CIA, Microsoft, Satan, CCRU, or alternatively advocate submission to the most mundane construction of quotidian reality, dismissing the hyperstitional chaos that operates beyond the screens, cosmological dark matter and dark energy, virtual, imperceptible, unknown. This is why atheism is usually so boring. Both conspiracy and common sense, the normal reality script, depend on the dialectical side of the double game, on reflective twins, belief and disbelief, because disbelief is merely the negative complement of belief, cancellation of the provocation, disintensification, neutralization of stimulus, providing a metabolic yawn break in the double game. Unbelief escapes all this by building a plane of potentiality, upon which the annihilation of judgment converges the real cosmic indeterminacy. For the demons of unbelief, there is no monarch programming except as a side effect of initiatory monarch deprogramming, equals monarch paranoia. CCRU denies it was ever part of the program. It denies there ever was a program until the deprogramming process introduced it. Deprogramming simultaneously retroproduced a program, just as witch trials preceded devil worship and regressive hypnotherapy preceded false memory syndrome. Yet once these fictions were produced, they function in and as reality. It isn't that belief in Project Monarch produces the Monarch program, but rather that such belief produces equivalent effects to those that the reality of Project Monarch would produce, including some that are extremely peculiar and counterintuitive. Within the paranoid mode of the double game, even twins are turned so as to confirm a persecutor in unity, that of the puppet master, the reflection of God, the monarch. How absurd to imagine that Lemurian pandemonium has one purpose or function, or that it could support the throne of a monarch. From the perspective of pandemonium, gods and their conspiracies emerge all over the place, in countless numbers. My name is Legion, for we are many. Unity is only ever a project, a teleological aspiration, never a real presupposition or actual foundation. Monarch paranoia is primordially an allergic panic response to seething, teeming, pandemonic multiplicity. Everywhere it looks, it finds the same enemy, the Rorschach-blotted hallucinations of the evil one, masked deliriously in its myriads of deviations, digressions, and discrepancies. In the hands of Justine Morrison, monarch paranoia is an overt attempt to overcode Lemurian polyculture to the attribution of unity purpose, reducing it to the white Atlantean theme. CCRU denounces this endeavor in the strongest possible terms. We are forced to admit, however, that Morrison's comments on Microsoft, Bill Gates, and MSN8 latch onto a number of intriguing phenomena worthy of further intense investigation. Whoever, or whatever, hatched the MSN8 campaign evidently emerged from a zone far beyond the commonly accepted domain of corporate influence and control. For a $300 million advertising campaign to feature a grotesque insectoid Ubermensch, and for it to be widely accused of Satanism, are sufficiently abnormal occurrences to merit serious attention. While strenuously denying intimate involvement with Dollar Bill or the Microsoft Corporation, the CCRU is in a position to confirm the Kabbalistic affinity between its own name and the latest MSN product that Morrison alludes to, MSN8 equals 81 equals CCRU. Our provisional hypothesis is that the company accidentally summoned something from beyond the spheres of the call sign it does not understand. In this regard, Microsoft personnel are not puppet masters, but only puppets. The same may indeed be true of Justine Morrison, and even of the CCRU, but no monarch is pulling the strings.